After reading a few sites and specifically Yahoo Sports and a couple others, I see, you know, what's happening right now. And you have to ask yourself, is this the end of the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard era? Because now from the reports that are out there that I'm pretty sure you have read or that you can check out yourself, the Clippers are testing the waters with Paul George in regards to a trade. And, when I look at the situation, if that's true, if it's, not too much speculation with that, I mean, it could be a situation where it could be ideal for the Clippers because they might be able to, put something out there where they can offer a team like maybe the Blazers, a couple of future picks, and maybe another player, Marcus Morris, added with a Paul George and possibly get somebody like Damian Lillard. Now, they get Damian Lillard added with Kawhi Leonard. And, I know you're probably hearing reports about Chris Paul possibly, being bought out or something like that by the Washington Wizards and possibly coming to a reunion with the Clippers. That would be an ideal situation also. I mean, because now you'd have a solidified scorer in Damian Lillard who would take a lot of pressure off Kawhi. Kawhi can, not be rushed back as soon because the team is flailing and they're underperforming as the way they were kind of doing this past season. Because, when we saw Kawhi come back this past season from his ACL, one thing that came out of Kawhi's camp that I spoke about in previous videos was that his camp was upset that Kawhi had to basically, come back a little bit early and not take his time the way he wanted to get himself right and get himself how he needed to be so he can really help this team. And then at the end of the season, about a month before the season ended or a little bit less, Paul George goes down with a hyperextended knee, which is not his fault. And, that really put more pressure on Kawhi and his knee to uphold this team because that last month of the season, they were fighting for their lives to get into the playoffs. Either that or they were going to land into a play-in tournament situation where they had to fight and claw their way out of that. So they fought and clawed their way and won the last several games of the season just to get into the playoffs. And first off, they had to face the Phoenix Suns, one of the toughest teams in the playoffs in a lot of people's mind, which a lot of people thought the Phoenix Suns would be the team that would be representing the Western Conference, in which they didn't because the Nuggets were, and we know what happened after that. They ended up winning the championship. But my point is, it was a tough road for the Clippers regardless, especially when PG went down. And, here's another situation where we could blame Kawhi Leonard. We can blame a lot of things on Kawhi because he is the number one guy on the team and he has been all this time. But at the same time, he really hasn't had the help that he needed because we talk about the bubble and all those things. Who really didn't show up in the bubble? Was it Kawhi or was it Paul George? Now, Paul George say he had a shoulder injury, which I believe he did. I'm not saying Paul George is lying or anything like that. I'm just saying that when it's time to show up, when you're on the floor, you're accountable. Whether you have an injury or not, you still have to show up. We saw Kawhi not show up in a game 7, one game in that whole playoffs. He didn't show up because he got tired. He got worn down because he wasn't getting the necessary help from his protege or his counterpart in Paul George, in which a lot of people have speculated, a lot of people know the playoff P thing was real for a while. Paul George kind of erased a little bit of that in the playoffs where Kawhi went down and they went to the conference finals, but Paul George missed 2 back-to-back free throws in a clutch situation, and it didn't help extend the series, which he could have against the Phoenix Suns. And we never know, maybe the Clippers pull out a game or two and go to the finals that year if Paul George hits those free throws. And that's the thing. A lot of people look at Paul George as not being, you can't count on him when you really need him. And that's really been one of his biggest, flaws or things about Paul George that a lot of people draw back on. A lot of people like Paul George because he seems like a cool dude and he really can hoop and he really is a good player. But when it comes down to winning championships, is he really that second guy that you can count on? I personally rather see Kawhi be with somebody like Jimmy Butler. If Jimmy Butler was on the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard, you can count on one thing with Jimmy Butler. He may not score a lot of points all the time, but if he had a superstar player take pressure off him, from scoring, and he could focus on defense, which he's really good at. He's always been good at defense. He got drafted for defense. He got drafted into the NBA because of his defense, and he's added scoring to his game over the years. But my point is, if you put somebody like him on the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard, it'd probably be championship, because you know what you're getting out of Jimmy Butler. And this playoff Jimmy thing, a lot of people really believe it, and a lot of people think it's real. And, I'm not a big, fan of his scoring, but I am a big fan of his defense. His defense is very, very sound, and defense wins championships last time I checked. So, I mean, there again, Paul George, I'm not comparing him and Paul George because there's no comparison really. But my point is, you need more of somebody you can count on. And to me, Kawhi never had somebody he can count on in Paul George. I've questioned it the whole time since I've been doing this with, speaking of the Clippers and their whole operation and everything, because Paul George has moments where he's really good. And I think he's a really good player. I think he's a dope player. Honestly, I really do. I just don't know if he's a championship caliber player. And that's what I question about a lot of the talent on the Clippers throughout the years. Championship talent, guys that play with that edge, guys to play with that dog in them, guys that just kind of have that drive in them. You see what I'm saying? You can't really teach that. It just has to be in you. And I don't know if Paul George has that drive, that transmission in him that can push him to be the player a lot of people believe that he can be in big situations and in situational situations, if I might say. So I'm not saying nothing bad about Paul George, but I could see the reason why the Clippers, if they are thinking testing the waters and shopping Paul George, I can definitely see why. Because when Paul George is there, the last time we seen Kawhi and PG together was the bubble in the like together, as in like trying to make a run for the playoffs. That was their best chance to win a championship to me. That was their best run. And then, of course, the one where Kawhi got hurt with Utah, but Kawhi got hurt, so we can't say much about that. But that was the last time we seen them together where I felt like they really had a good chance of winning it, because a lot was going on and they were hungry, I thought. And, I didn't think Paul George would fold the way he did in the bubble. But, Kawhi didn't play good that one game, which is that game 7. Understandable if you want to say he choked too, but I don't believe Kawhi choked. If you tell me a guy didn't play good one game out of 2 or 3 rounds that they played in the playoffs, and he only played bad one game, that's okay to me. Because that means he's not getting the help from his other guys the way he should for him to have to go out there and have a game like that, whereas they should have won that series way before. Now, of course, they was up 3-1 and they still should have won it, but it takes a team to win. It doesn't take one guy. One guy can't win a championship. A team has to win a championship. One guy can put you over the hump certain games. He can help you win certain games in the series, but the team has to ultimately put a team away in a 7-game series, and the Clippers couldn't because Paul George, his counterpart, wasn't there. And here's another situation where he got injured again, the hyperextended knee. A couple years ago, he got COVID right before the play-in tournament, whereas a lot of people believe Paul George could have helped got him out the play-in tournament, and maybe Kawhi possibly could have came back in those playoffs, late in the playoffs, but he caught COVID right before then. And like I said, none of this is his fault, but it's just misfortune. And misfortune sometimes makes owners in the front office think, well, maybe we need to make another decision, because there's always going to be misfortune with this guy. It's always something. And, Kawhi, everybody know Kawhi had knee issues way before he signed the Clippers. He had knee issues back when he was with Toronto, and the San Antonio Spurs. So that's not something nobody don't know. It's just that he needs the proper help to get, help him get over the hump. You know what I'm saying? And he got to have certain players in certain places to make certain moves. And maybe Paul George isn't cutting it to the Clippers organization, the front office. So if they're shopping him, like I said, who knows what they'll get in return if they try to really actually trade him. But then again, don't be shocked if he's still on the team next year. It could just be all speculation, but I do think they're definitely testing the waters, because it's definitely something to be looked into, and they definitely got to try to find a way to at least make it to a championship. You see what I'm saying? So whatever the Clippers need to do, they're pretty much going to do at this point. Whether it's anybody on the team needs to be expendable. I'm not too sure about Kawhi, but you never know. But we'll just have to see how it goes. But either way, leave any comments in the comment section, and as I always say, we'll talk about it.